Hey, thank you for the kind introduction. And I also think it's very great that you are in the room, that Ignacio Castillo is in the room, and I saw already Sarah Friedel, because what I will be presenting and discussing with you is something that's a group effort. We have been discussing a lot about our findings, working with young peoples, and how we make sense of them, how we make them graspable for practice. And I have to say that although I was trying to give a broader picture of what planning under refiguration actually could mean in the end, I have to tune down your expectation there, because I think we still are in the process to really understand what this means when it comes to urban planning and urban design. And this is maybe also something to say at the beginning, that I talk a lot from the perspective of urban design and urban planning, and somehow presenting our results through that lens. Today's spatial constellations and everyday routines are entangled. They are entangled across social, digital, physical, and temporal layers. And under refiguration, presence on a site, in a place, does not equals presence in place. And I'm starting here, you see, I'm an urban planner, urban designer, and when I go to conferences and when I'm invited to talk in different cities, I usually have a list of projects I want to look at, and this is a project I looked at in Budapest. It's a brownfield redevelopment, a public space, a green space, but with many different functions. And you would say it's a very ambitious and well-executed project. I visited it on Mile Day in March 2025, and the space was quite intensely used. Yet at the second thought or second look, you see people are there and they do a lot of things, and most of them had their phones, their cell phones in their hands. You see infrastructure, of course, providing also some amenities for it. You see, again, nice spaces, people can rest and sit down, and yet they may be not even feeling the wood they're sitting on. They may be navigating the messages they've gotten through the day. They may be also organizing their afternoon, checking notices from their children, or I did see a group of young travelers. I think they had small trolleys, so probably they were having a weekend trip or something, playing cards there. What you also could see in one corner, it was flocked with people. Cherry trees on blossom, and I've seen and none of the persons in that area was not taking pictures or posing for pictures that probably went right into their social media accounts. And again, you wonder, how much are they present in place? How much do they make these connections that go way beyond the site? So we would claim that today many people constitute space today through the connection of online and offline, hybrid spatial routines that are coupled on site practices, but also to off-site drivers. And for this talk, I would talk about refiguration in urban planning by putting forward two perspectives. One, a compact definition of hybrid space, because that's something that was with us the whole time, working with young people. And yes, I will also talk about young people, about youth spatial knowledge that I would claim, and I have not discussed this with the team, so I'm also interested what they think of it, young spatial knowledge as a sensor for hybrid space, and maybe also a sensor for planning and designing under refiguration. So in the end, I will talk a little bit about the consequences for planning and design. But let's start with hybrid space as a condition, I would say, for planning under refiguration. Over the past years, our team has researched the refiguration of spaces through the lens of children and youth. So when I say young people, I usually mean children and youth. And our interest is and was the spatial knowledge of young people, by which I mean the ways individuals think about space, perceive, construct space, and form associations with them. And we did a qualitative meta-analysis, really looking back until the late 1960s up to today to trace changes, but also some constant aspects. And one finding was that mediated knowledge is on the rise when it comes to spatial knowledge of young people. And you see that media or mediated can have many forms. You see the pile of media this young person is sitting upon, and you would claim that compared to the 1960s up to today, this pile has gotten larger, and the digital mediatization is part of that pile with its offerings of platforms, but also accordingly the devices that come with it. We have been working with 14 and 16-year-olds in Berlin, Germany, and Lima in the past 4 years, aiming to understand even better their daily practices and the impact digital mediatization has on how they perceive, engage with local physical material surroundings. And to us, it was also important that these young people are more than just a topic to us. They are our co-researchers, means we involved them in developing a mapping app. We also involved them into looking at our results. So we had member checks with teenagers explaining what our findings were and getting their critical views on them. And building on these observations, on working with these young people, and at the same time connecting to an ongoing cross-disciplinary discussion on hybrid spaces, we had the feeling that a consolidated theoretical foundation that really explained what is this hybrid space, this connection of online, offline, is still missing. And this is what we set out, looking at the scholarly debates and coming up with 4 dimensions. And I would very shortly walk you through these 4 dimensions we identify that together compose, I would say, hybrid space. That is, of course, the physical dimension. We're back in the park. It's infrastructures, material presence, and interface devices that in the end enable hybrid space. So it has a physicality, hybrid space. And if you look in the photo, yes, there are buildings, there are public spaces, bodies, phones that form the basic layer that lets digital interaction happens. And physicality shapes hybrid space through how bodies, devices, and settings are arranged and how these arrangements gain meaning in the interplay with digital elements. Of course, virtuality is a must in hybrid space. Digital content and platforms do not merely overlay space, they co-constitute how we perceive and act. And we may not know what this person is doing on the phone, but for sure, platform logics are at play, algorithm filters are at play here, geotagging, augmented realities, we don't know, but virtuality situates people in a digitally mediated context, and through personalization of these offerings, situated sense making and digital layer actively steers attention and behaviors. Sociality is then how relationships and communications arrange hybrid space. So it's the public-private dynamics of people, how they communicate, the portable territories they carry with their phone structures, messages, calls, posts, like this person there having the stroller. Maybe it's the aunt, maybe it's the grandma, we don't know. Maybe she's calling and talking to the mothers. But ties unfold on-site and at a distance, reshaping how people relate, position themselves across physical and digital setting. And last but not least, the fourth dimension is time. And hybrid spaces are made over time. I found among my pictures these pictures. You see myself with my colleagues back then. We all are educators for architecture in an association that deals with architecture education for children and youth. And we were in the park taking a threefold selfie. So it's basically me taking a selfie and the others taking a selfie at the same time. I'm really bad in social media, so you will not find this picture online, but the other two pictures you will find online. And this shows that hybrid spaces are made over time, recursively, synchronously, and asynchronously at times. Hybrid space has a time dimension, and what we do in a space leaves a digital trace that feeds into the next visit. So I Google a square, arrive already primed by image or open maps. While I'm there, post a clip, and friends come tomorrow because they saw mine. Past, present, and next times are stitched together by how we work, mostly with our phones, but other digital tools are at play too. In the end, we would say hybrid spaces are not a single type of space. Think of them more as a spectrum. And we were quite early thinking that this spectrum of spatial arrangement and how these dimensions, physicality and virtuality and sociality and temporality are mixed, could be compared like to a sound mixing console. I was very excited to see one over there. A little bit like each of these dimensions is like a slider that can move independently, and yet we always experience the mix as a whole. It's like live mixing. Hybrid space are continuously refigured, we would say, producing shifting rhythms. The analytical merit of the dimensions is the capacity to describe highly diverse hybrid spatial experience, we would claim, from loosely hybrid situation to more dense figurations marked by more multifaceted digital physical interrelations. And to make that clear, I'm just giving two examples. In our paper, we discussed 4, but I picked only 2. And yes, people still play Pokemon Go. If you think not, no, the scene is quite alive. And Pokemon Go, to us, is a good example to show that it can be a quite dense, synthesized hybrid spatial figuration that happens here. The image shows Pokemon Go Community Day in a Berlin square. Here, all sliders are quite high, as you see. The physicality is clear. The game objectives are anchored at an exact location. Here, looks like Alexanderplatz. So the players must walk through the city to participate. And the quality, of course, of the sidewalk, of the plaza, Alexanderplatz, the GPS reception, the surrounding urban infrastructure directly conditions how the game can be played. Virtuality, digital content does not simply sit on top of the setting. No, it is co-produced in action. We have augmented reality. Do we have any players in the room? You know, it drives you in. It is there. It's insert creatures into the immediate surrounding, and the apps geotags cues and interfaces actively to steer attention or route choices or the path of the game. Sociality, the participation is both co-present, so in person, but also networks, meaning players come together in those rides or raids physically, they have to coordinate themselves and strangers through chats to come in person together in those arenas. And for a limited time period, the square becomes a temporary gaming community. And temporary was already mentioned, so the time dimension is there too. We have a play that is organized by shared clocks, repeating cycles, timed events, countdowns, etc. So taking together, these dynamics produce a real-time synthesis of digital physical space. Bodies move through the city, attention is guided by the platform, temporary collectives emerge and dissolve, and the whole scene runs on a tightly aligned temporal rhythms. In comparison, I take you to a cafe. A situated limited hybrid figuration, we would claim. So in this example, we use the mixing console a little bit more selectively. We have all four dimensions again, they're present, but the sliders, the virtual sliders dominate, and the overall synthesis stays partial. Why? The physicality of the cafe is important. It supplies enabling infrastructure, seating, Wi-Fi, power, light, thermal comfort, which frames and permits the digital activity, but it does not really strongly shape the content of the work. It's more like behind the scene. Virtuality, the laptop, then opens the doorways to email, cloud documents, collaboration platforms, so the cafe functions as one node in a distributed workspace. The digital tasks steer attention, while the immediate surrounding is more recede to the background. Sociality, yes, there are other patterns in the cafe. We have a light social atmosphere. It's not a loneliness really there. It's background noise, and maybe you have casual interactions with the waitress or with neighboring people on the table next to you. Yet it's rather a remote interaction that is happening. That's why the slider is a little bit lower. And temporality, yes, time is organized by asynchronous exchanges and at times also synchronous exchanges. We have scheduled calls, ongoing tasks, and so on. So taking this together, the scene is clearly hybrid, we would claim, but it's a little bit more loosely compared to the situation before. In the end, we have to say that to grasp how hybrid spaces are individual constituted, the sliders do help you to see, but we still have to discuss how users actively synthesizing this hybrid space. And here we draw on two concepts of the CRC, translocalization and polycontextualization, and we don't understand them as additional dimensions of hybrid space. We have been discussing that. Is that another slider or not? But we rather treat them as relational logics that shape how figurations are experienced and assembled by the very people we saw on some of these drawings. So translocalization, for the people in the room that are not familiar with the term, refers to incorporating geographically distant or digital mediated references like peoples, events, or points of interest into a present spatial experience. It explains how hybrid spaces stretch across location, linking multiple geographies in a single act of synthesis. And polycontextualization highlights how individuals navigate these overlapping roles, institutional logics, and communicative settings simultaneously. And again, taking you back to the cafe, the laptop with a laptop in a cafe practice, if someone casually checks email on the laptop while enjoying a cafe, they remain mostly within a single role and communicative frame. So it's a low translocalization, a low polycontextuality that happens. Another person at the same table right next to it might coordinate a global research project via Zoom, respond to Discord across time zones, and edits a co-authored paper. So here we have multiple distant references drawn into the moment, and we have a much denser hybrid spatial constitution that happens. And this denser and less denser, we feel like we can grasp with these two perspectives or these two concepts of translocalization and polycontextualization. But we also think there may be more. There may be more, and that would be an interesting discussion. I promised to bring the young people back. As we described hybrid spaces via the mixed console or the mixed sound console, we still may need trained ears to notice when this mix breaks or gets out of tune. And I think young people give us that sensor. Our studies show that young people constantly navigate hybrid spaces under a strong asymmetric constraint. They navigate adult-made rules, they navigate supervision, limited resources, money, data, at times limits to their mobility, independent mobility, so their practices are mostly mostly steered by permissions, gatekeeping, visible norms, safety concerns, and access to networks. And precisely because they cannot simply opt out, the frictions, I would claim, of hybrid spatial constitutions, they do show up first in their everyday routines. And especially today, and I think these two quotes and headlines from newspapers that promote to forbid social media for 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds, and we know countries in the world that have already passed a law in that sense. And on the other hand, we have just recently in the news that the amount of parents that geotag their children and sharing locations also with their children has grown. We have to say that this is not always a problem for young people. Yeah? They do get comfort and security also out of this. But nevertheless, you could somehow say that the temporal and social settings, and we go back to my sliding boards, they're somehow fixed, and they're not broken yet, but they're somehow fixed. We don't know what happens if some of these laws get really passed and strictly enforced. What happens? What does it mean for planning under refiguration? I would claim that it is important that planners, designers keep in mind these hybrid spatial practices, that they're there and they shift attention, they shift practices, they make this translocal connections, this polycontextual understandings of space, and we have to pay attention to them, because if we plan and design certain areas, certain spaces, then we actually are operating in a live mix, a real-time coupling in hybrid spaces. And spatial experience is shaped by these interlockings. I already hinted by the young people that some of these sliders, we have these four, social, digital, physical, and temporal. They are not, or some individuals are not in the power to push these sliders up and down. And this does something, and we have to pay attention to that. I mean, we know advocacy planning, for example, advocacy designing, and I think this is an area we have to pay attention again. To me, working with the young people in Berlin and also in Lima showed or indicated how the spatial practices already react to these hybrid spatial experiences they made. Again, young people not always see them as a problem. They react at times very pragmatically. But we can certainly say that planning under refiguration should treat these frictions, should be aware of these frictions as, I would say, diagnostic cues and co-tune settings through adaptive responsive measures, and recognizing young people's spatial knowledge as a diagnostic and also conceptual intelligence is important than just saying that they're making noise. Thank you.